Welcome back. We're going to get into lesson 3 now. This is DoD funding organizations. Fair warning, we've got a lot of screenshots here. We've got a lot to get through. So if you're feeling a little tired, you may want to grab a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and we will get through this, but just fair warning. All right, so I'm going to make myself small for this one because, like I said, we've got a lot of screenshots. So DoD funding organizations. Now, okay, they can be organized. We can think of them as organized in two different ways. Now, they can either be through the services, so like Army, Navy, Air Force, or they could be through DoD, or we could call it like big DoD. So let's see some examples of this. Now, the real obvious ones here would be the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, or AFOSR, the Army Research Office, or ARO, and the Office of Naval Research, or ONR. Now, these are some of the funders, DoD funders that you are probably most familiar with. These organizations exist almost exclusively to support extramural research. That means research that's done outside of the organization itself. Most of this work is done at universities. These are funding organizations, right? Now, there are DoD level organizations that fund research as well. DARPA would be one, and again, they do a lot of funding as well. So DTRA, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, does fund research, including at universities, but this is not exclusively a funding organization, and there are many more organizations within DoD that do research themselves, in-house or intramural research, and that fund research at universities, in industry, etc. So one example of these, of one of those, is CERTUP and ESTCP. So these are environmental related organizations that are DoD organizations, and they do fund university research. So to give you a comprehensive list of all of the DoD organizations that are funding research at the time that I'm making this recording, the best place to get that was from grants.gov. So it looks a little bit ugly here because, we've got parts of this sidebar screenshotted, but really is the best way to show it to you. So let's just take a look and see if we can find some of the organizations that I referred to on the last slide. How do they show up here? All right, so Air Force Research Lab, that has 8 announcements right now. Now, that's not AFOSR though, but I did, I was drawn to that because 8 is kind of a lot there, right? AFOSR has 9 items published on grants.gov right now. And for DARPA, we see that each one of their offices has their own announcement. That's a feature of DARPA. They continue on to the next page. And now with Army, we've got Department of Army Materiel Command, and we've got the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Army. Okay, so there's a lot there, right? But I'm not seeing Army Research Office yet, right? So there's more as we go down. Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and we're going to get down here to ONR. There we are, Office of Naval Research. Okay, so I wanted to show you this because this is pretty typical that it's a little bit kind of messy when you look at it all and you're trying to understand where you may find what you're looking for. But let's continue on. All right. Okay. So now, when we're talking about the OXRs, what are we referring to? Because part of what I want to do is demystify this, and when you hear people using jargon or acronyms that you don't understand, that just makes it more mystifying, right? Not more clear. So what is it when you hear people refer to the OXRs? Okay, the OXRs are the Offices of Research of the Services. So this is ONR, AFOSR, and ARO. So the X is representing whichever one of the services. So now you know what that is. Now let's talk about them kind of broadly and in general before we dive into each one. All right, so what you need to find when you are considering you want to start looking for funding from one of the OXRs is you need to find what research areas they are funding. Now these can be referred to as research areas, or they can be referred to as topics. So that's basically the same thing, and those can be used interchangeably. You also need to find the announcement. Now, sometimes the announcement and the research areas or topics are in the same document or on the same web page or linked easily where it's clear how you can put those two together. Other times it could be more challenging to identify the research areas or the topics and piece that together with the correct announcement. So we're going to go through for each one of the OXRs and show you how each one of them is doing that, as of right now. And keep in mind this can change. All right, so we're going to start with AFOSR, and we are just going to their website here. This is a good place to start. And you can see that there are a couple different places that you could try to go. And it's not always clear where you should go here, right? So, you could go to funding opportunities. That could be an obvious place to look. Now, I've already done this, so I'm going to tell you where I ended up going to get the information that we need. But I ended up going to research areas, okay? So let's see what happens when we click there. All right, so it tells us pretty clearly, this is very helpful, I think it's pretty straightforward, that the areas are organized into 4 scientific divisions. So we know there's engineering and complex systems, information and networks, physical sciences, and chemistry and biological sciences. So this is pretty straightforward. Now, I'm not going to take you through clicking through, each one of the pages that we need to get to go to where we're going. But it was pretty straightforward on the AFOSR site to click on one of these divisions, which I think was engineering and complex systems. And then from there to get a list of programs where there's a program description, for example, for this one program that relates to game-changing thermodynamics. And you can read a pretty straightforward and clear description of the program. And we hear that you are highly encouraged to contact the program officer, and we have the name of the program officer and the email address. So this is one way to get, again, the topic areas or the research areas from AFOSR. But keep in mind that, websites are not always maintained, to be updated very often. So this is a good place to start, but you would definitely want to verify that this information is current before you move forward too much with something. So one way to make sure that you're getting the most current information, really the way, is to look and see what's at grants.gov. So we can go back to grants.gov and click on, as I showed you on the screenshot with all the different all different funding opportunities organized by the different orgs within DoD. So for AFOSR, we have a number here, maybe it was 9 or something, and there is one that says Research Interests of the Air Force Office of Scientific Research. So this is the one that you want for the main AFOSR BAA. And if you click on that, then you are then able to download the BAA. And this is just what the first page of that looks like. Now, you can then go to the table of contents. And now in this case, for AFOSR, we see that there are program descriptions in the first part of this document. So this is pretty straightforward. And you would definitely want to scroll through all of this. I would not recommend just reading the table of contents and then making your decision there where you fit and just looking at that program. You should actually skim through this or do a find for your keywords, because your research could quite possibly fit in more than one of these programs, and you would want to know that, right? So then within this document, they also provide the information on how to submit. So this is, in my opinion, pretty straightforward because all the information's right there. Now, when we move over to Army, we are looking at the Army Research Office. Now, when you hear about ARO, you're often going to hear it related to ARL, which is Army Research Laboratory. Now, AFOSR has a similar relationship to a research laboratory, which is the Air Force Research Laboratory. But in the case of ARO, I think it's more common that you will hear the organization referred to as ARO/ARL or ARL-ARO. So just putting that out there so that you can understand what that is and what you're looking for. Now, this is the ARL website. You can get to that very easily through Googling. And then you are going to want to click at this top menu on Collaborate with Us. This will take you to the ARL Broad Agency Announcement. So I did say that even though it's going to be referred to as ARO, it's also going to be referred to as ARL, so don't panic. That's what that is. So what happens, when you click there? So when you click there, you get to this page, and you can view and search on the website, but I do prefer to download the BAA documents as a PDF and the document. So this is the announcement. This is where it gives you the instructions for how to submit and eligibility and all that stuff. And then the topics, which is the same as, research areas, those are a separate document. So you want to look at both of those. Now, when we do that, we are going to look first here at the topics. So what do we get? So we see here it says research topics. So that looks like we're in the right place. And let's see, it looks like it's generated on this date. And this is a good thing to check here. See, it says May 17th because then you know when it was most recently updated. So this is something that they've had on the topic document for some time now, which I think is helpful. And I want to draw your attention to this heading here. So when you get to, really this is just the second page, it says Available Army Research Office ARO Research Topics. Okay. Then they do state that they're listed in alphabetical order. So you are going to need to scroll through these, and I do recommend that you scroll through and scan them, and you can also do a Control F and find the keywords that you're looking for. But you will want to scroll through and read about each program that could be relevant to you. This one is Advanced Learning Enabled Intelligent Cyber-Physical Systems. So you've got the name and email address and phone number for the program manager, or the TCOP, which is the technical point of contact. So let's go further into the document. Now, when you get to about, there we go, 2/3 of the way through the document, see now we're on page 63, 64, you will see another section of the document. It says Available Army Research Directorate ARD topics. So ARD is referring to the part of Army Research Laboratory that is not ARO, that is where the in-house research happens. So there's scientists and engineers that are doing research. And unlike, let's go back to the previous section, the ARO topics, these are equivalent to the AFOSR topics in that each one of these programs that's described here is a funding program. So every year the program will receive a budget. There is not any research that's in-house research that's happening under these programs. This is purely for extramural research. Now, in contrast, when we come to the ARD topics, These, you will notice, sound more applied, right? They sound more, and maybe you can't see that right here, but if you do scroll through them, you will notice they sound more applied. And these topics are ones that generally do not have a committed year-to-year funding line. So it's not known what kind of budget they might have, if that might change year to year. And generally, the technical points of contact, which you should absolutely reach out to, are probably people who are also doing research themselves and not full-time program managers. But you're going to have to ask to find out. But this is how things stand, at the moment. So you would still want to read these topics and reach out to somebody if you're doing research that you feel like could be a fit. But I do want to emphasize the difference between the ARO and the ARD topics, because of the way the document is presented, I don't think that it is very clear. Well, it's clear in that they are in different sections of the document, so I think that part is clear. But for one, it could be fairly easy to just kind of like scroll past this header here and kind of miss that this is a new section of the document. And two, there's not really an explanation for why one group of topics is ARO and why one is ARD. So please do keep that in mind. Now, the announcement itself, which is what gives you the instructions and the rules and the eligibility and all that kind of information, is a separate document. And this was actually found under the DoD AMC header or grouping within grants.gov. So like I had said on that previous slide, we didn't see ARO or ARL there. We actually had to look under AMC. So again, it can be found there, but just had to dig a little bit. And from there, we would click through and we can find the announcement. And let's see where we've got Murray, and we've got, let's see here, where the, there we go, DevCom Army Research Laboratory Broad Agency Announcement for Foundational Research. So that would be the one that you would want to click on there. Right. And then to highlight what is contained in this document, this just goes right into information about the funding opportunity. It's breaking down different types of awards that can be made, like the single investigator. I'm going to talk about that later, which is a research award is generally for one PI, but it could be for more than one PI, but we'll talk about that later. Short-term research award, the early career program is listed there, instrumentation and conference. So we also have eligibility. Now, in contrast to the AFOSR document, this one does not have the topics within it. That was a separate document. So I'm just repeating that because, it can be a little bit confusing or maybe not confusing, but just hard to remember, how each one of the OXRs is doing things. And it can differ a little bit. So let's go to the Navy. All right, so now we are at the website for the Office of Naval Research. And here is another one where you could say, well, I don't really know what to click on here, right? Because work with us sounds good, organization, that's a possibility, right? And our research. So what we ended up clicking on here, it was organization. That's where we got the information. Yeah, right there. Okay. So we clicked on organization, and that brings up the menu here. And let's see what we can get by clicking through into the departments. That's what we want here. All right, so the research topics here are going to be found under what is called codes. And so this could be confusing to you if you've never heard this terminology before. But let's look at what some of these codes are. Okay, here's one that has a shorter name, so we'll go with that. Ocean Battlespace Sensing, that is known as Code 32, and that there is a description that's given for that relates to ocean and meteorological science. undersea warfare, mine warfare, space technology, and marine mammals. Sea warfare and weapons is code 33, and so on. Okay, so from there, you are going to go on to the next level down within the organization, which is divisions. So this is from code 32. All right, so let's go back. So code 32 was ocean battle space sensing. So when we click on that, that's what takes us to the division. So let's look at the two technical divisions here. First of all, we do get contact information for the main POC for this code, but generally you're going to want to go deeper, closer into your research area to get to somebody who can help you. But you want to keep in mind that these email addresses and contact information for people at a higher level, those can be backup, right? If you're not able to get through to someone with the specific program, keep in mind these other points of contact that you see along as you click through the site. So we've got two divisions or three divisions, two technical divisions here, and ocean sensing and systems applications, ocean atmosphere and space sciences. So when we also here, I do want to point out that we have, if you click on contacts, because we see that here is a button that might be useful. And that does lead you to contacts for all of the program officers in code 32. Now, it's not telling us what their specific program is, but I did want to point that out because this is a good resource to have a nice list like this. So let's continue on, but I just wanted to click that button there. Okay, so we get to one of the divisions. Now, this is called Division 322, Ocean, Atmosphere, and Space Sciences. And notice this was from code 32, so we can see the convention in terms of naming them. And here they state, okay, here is another point of contact that presumably is in charge of all of these programs or at that level within the organization, but there are specific programs. We can click on each one of those and get a description for the program. And this is very, pretty thorough information here about the research area that they're focusing on. And scrolling down, we do get the name and email address of this program officer. So this is how you would work your way through the ONR research topics or topic areas, which again can be found under codes and then divisions. So going to grants.gov, you are then going to get the announcement. And this is going to provide you with information on, what's required for the submission, eligibility, etc., review process, and so forth. Okay, so let's do a quick overview of the OXRs. Now, again, you are going to need to find both the research areas, also known as topics or research topics, and the announcement itself. Those could be one document. In 2 out of 3 cases, they're separate pieces of information. Now, there are similarities between the OXRs, but there are also differences. So when you have an experience with one of them, that's great to get that experience. You may want to use something you learned from that experience to inform how you approach another one of the organizations. But do keep in mind that there are significant differences in terms of how each one of these organizations operates. For example, there are significant differences among the early career programs that they each run. We'll talk about that later when we talk about programs. The average dollar amount is different among these organizations that would come from something like a single investigator or a core program. Again, we'll talk about this in programs. But just because you had a DURIP funded or somebody who had an instrumentation award funded at Office of Naval Research for $600,000, that does not necessarily mean that it's a good idea to submit an unsolicited DURIP or instrumentation award to the Army Research Office for that same dollar amount and think that would have success because somebody had success with it over at the other OXR, right? So the amount that they can fund on different types of awards can vary, so don't make assumptions there. They also can have very different approaches to their program reviews. So program reviews are these events that happen generally when funded PIs from the program will come in and present on their progress on the work that they are doing that's supported by the organization. And these could happen every year. They could happen once in the lifetime of the award. They could maybe not happen at all for you. And they could be open to the public. They could be closed to just the individuals who are presenting in a few select number of government employees. They could be semi-open, open to the government but not the public. They could be held in Northern Virginia. They could be held in another part of the country, or they could be virtual. So if you've heard about program reviews somewhere, again, don't just assume that then the program review somewhere else is going to be run the same or even very similar. So you always want to get information as to what is the situation that I'm looking at for this specific case or this specific opportunity and not make those assumptions. Also, just a different culture. It's a different workplace. It's a different group of people. And so you might feel a different vibe and just feel a different culture at each one of these organizations. So keep that in mind too. Okay, so we are going to move on to another well-known DoD funder, which is DARPA. So again, you can get to the DARPA website pretty easily. And once you're there, you would click on opportunities and you are going to see that each one of the technical offices maintains its own announcement, or BAA, or broad agency announcement. So what happens when we click on that? So when we click on that, we do see that on their website, they have very clearly listed, and it's easy to find, each one of the announcements for each one of their offices. So this is pretty straightforward here. Okay. What happens when we look at one of these announcements? So this is one for DSO, or Defense Sciences Office, and they have information on the technical thrust descriptions. They also have the eligibility information and, just other further required information. So let's scroll down in the document to where it says technical thrust areas, and that's right here. So if you want to read these, you can pause it. I'm going to kind of just keep moving through, but they do have short descriptions, very short descriptions of these areas. All right, so going back, let's just go back to where we had the opportunity to do a search. Through here, we've got Explore, and you can choose People, and you can get the program managers by selecting from the drop-down each one of their offices, and you can get a list of people here. Now, you can contact them through the website. So that is the way to send them an email. Now, I do want to make a point about people who work as involved in the technical programs as technical experts at DARPA who are not actually federal employees, and they are not program managers. They are called SETAs, okay? SETA stands for Systems, Engineering, and Technical Assistance. It's SETA. No one ever says Systems, Engineering, and Technical Assistance, so they always say SETAs. So SETAs are people who are hired for usually a couple years at a time. They're contractors, so they're working for a private business, but that business has a contract with DoD to provide this technical assistance. And what they do is they support the DARPA PMs as technical assistants. So these are people that generally will have a PhD, and they're subject matter experts, and they work very closely with the DARPA PMs. So you want to consider the SETAs that you may encounter, people who, while they're not actual program managers, they are very close to being a program manager. They are working daily with the program managers closely. So don't discount these folks. These would be people that would be very good for you to interact with, and they may have a bit more availability than the program manager. So be aware of the existence of the CETAs and use them as a resource. They're not going to, again, be listed here as a program manager, but they are there and they can help you. All right, so another part of the DARPA website that is useful for you to check out is the new program managers. So they will list the new program managers, and you can perhaps reach out to these people if there's someone close to your topic area, because as they're new, they may not be getting quite as many emails yet, as they will a year from now. So that's a good resource as well. Now, another resource for you to be aware of is DARPA Connect programs. So DARPA Connect is an initiative that I believe is a couple years old now, where DARPA has done outreach primarily through traveling around the US and doing events to engage new performers, so academics, businesses, etc., in the DARPA research and engineering enterprise. So the idea here is that you can go to an event and experience a series of talks that provides an overview of how DARPA works, what they're all about, and importantly, how you can engage with them. So if you go to the DARPA Connect site, you can click on events and you can see when and where events are happening. There are some virtual events, so of course those are easy to get to, and other, again, various types of events, but the DARPA Connect events are happening across the country, throughout the year. So people ask, should I go to a DARPA Connect event? If you are in driving distance, if this is something that can easily fit your schedule, then absolutely you should go. I've been to one. I presented a lightning talk at one. I'll mention the next slide. But if this involves taking multiple days off, your normal job duties, flying across the country, trying to get just a few minutes with a DARPA PM to chat, I don't think you necessarily need to do that when you could set up an opportunity to speak with them or a CETA or get the information and have the conversations you need without doing something that's that much travel and that big of a commitment. But if it's convenient for you to get to, then I would recommend that you absolutely do that. So you can view the recordings from DARPA Connect events on YouTube. So this is really wonderful. And last fall, this was DARPA Connect North Carolina, held in Greensboro, and I am local to the area, so I was able to participate, even giving a lightning talk that if you click over to this on YouTube, you can see me talking about LinkedIn there. So you can see, there's engaging DARPA program managers, understanding the DARPA announcements. That's a very useful talk for you to watch. So I encourage you to check these out. Now, one thing I'm not going to get into here, but if you're going to be engaging with DARPA, it's good for you to know about the Heilmeyer Catechism. And this is something that I got directly from the DARPA website, a screenshot right from there. So I am not going to read through this, but you can pause it, take a look yourself, and understand that this is a framework commonly used at DARPA to consider investments. And so you should think about putting your idea in this framework before you really have a conversation with a DARPA PM or CETA about your idea. So think that through. Now, I would not say that this is the framework that you want to use for every basic research idea. This does lend itself to a bit more of an applied or engineering type effort. It's still a very useful framework to go through, but I just want to make the point that while this is used within DARPA and obviously has a lot of value, a lot of staying power, don't feel that before approaching any DoD organization at all, you need to have completed this exercise. Okay, so it's useful, but we don't have to use it for every single thing. All right, so we're going to wrap up with DARPA, and I'm squeezing something in here that involves been a pretty significant change of pace here, but I wanted to include this. So you're going to hear me talk. I've been talking a lot about organizations that are very heavily related to physical science, engineering, information science, and I'm gonna talk about health next. So I wanted to squeeze in something on social science. So there are social science related programs within the OXRs, and what's there is going to change year to year. So check those out. There's not, many, right? But there are some. If you are involved in social science, then you can check out Minerva. This is an initiative that's run by DoD, and you can click on the different sections of the website to learn more about it, the funding opportunities through that program. And what I have here is from their page where they say, recently funded awards. So you can click through and see what kind of awards are being made through Minerva. All right. So now I'm going to switch gears again, and we're going to get into talking about health-related funding, because this is something that is a little bit less straightforward to locate through the it's not very well represented through the OXRs. In fact, they are not doing supporting medically related research, except that certainly much basic research that is related to life science and related areas absolutely can have medical applications. So I want to, make that caveat there, but they are not explicitly focused on medical research. So clearly DoD does fund medical and health related research. So if you're in that area, where could you find opportunities? So that's what I'm going to talk about on these slides here. Okay, now these are just examples. This is not comprehensive, but we're just putting them out there to get us going. All right, so let's move myself again here. Okay, there we go. Army Medical Research and Development Command, MRDC, that is one that you may have heard of. And under that, we have Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. We have the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, CDMRP. That's another one that you may have heard of. That's a little bit different in how it's run. Again, these are all different and all have their own ways of being administered, right? And so CDMRP is a bit unique, but it falls under that category. We also have a medical research related to the Navy. And so in this case, they've got an overarching organization, Navy Medicine Research and Development Enterprise, they call that. Under there, we have Naval Health Research Center. And also we have, at the DoD level, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, or DTRA, and they do fund health-related research. So let's just get into some of these, not to try to provide a comprehensive overview, because that would really not be possible in any reasonable amount of time, but to show you how you go about looking for this information. So that's my goal here. Again, it's not to be comprehensive, but to just show you how you are going to go about that. So I am having a little bit of there we go. I'll get rid of the pointer for now. All right, so MRDC. All right, place you want to start there is going to the website. Pretty quickly from the website, you can get to the broad agency announcement. And then from there, you can get to doing business with us. All right, so, here I want to highlight something on this page, which is these social media buttons. So, when you click on those, and I did click on the LinkedIn one, you can end up following MRDC through that. Then when you're on LinkedIn, they actually give you suggestions of other related, according to LinkedIn, they're related accounts that you can follow. So this is a really good opportunity to go ahead and follow these if you're on LinkedIn, which I recommend that you are, especially because it can be harder to navigate through the web to these various organizations. So this could be a very good place for you to keep tabs on what's going on with them. Now, you will find that some of these DoD LinkedIn accounts provide updates regularly, and they're actually pretty useful, and others are not really updating. So you're just going to have to click and follow and see what happens, and you can always unfollow something if it's annoying, right, or not providing useful information. But again, I recommend going to these sites and really just clicking around, looking for links to the BAA, looking at the other pages to try to understand what they do. So let's talk about the BAA. All right, so that looks like the other BAAs, right? And you've got, your information on closing dates and all of that right on the front page. So you can then scroll through their table of contents and see something about what topical areas they're involved in. This would include infectious disease, combat casualty care, operational medicine, biological defense, and chemical defense research programs. So this would be a place that you could get started to learn more about that. Now, what if we want to look at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research? So, just go to that website. Here they've got a slider that's going through, and looks like they're featuring different events that have happened there recently. Apparently they had a conference on sleep. So this is just something that's helpful for you to check out, start to get a feeling of what's happening. And they've got their social media buttons here too. So, this would be another thing that you can go ahead and follow. Now, for their research areas, we found quite a few areas: blast exposure, HIV, hearing loss, sleep apnea. So, again, this is not to be comprehensive, but to show you what kind of topics you could expect to perhaps see supported, and also understand that these are the types of research topics that their own scientists and physicians are engaged with in research and care within these organizations. So for CDMRP, now I'm not going to get in detail here, but I did make the point that this program is pretty different. So that is because it is directed by Congress. Now, if you want to know more about this program, you can Google it and look for the official video on YouTube. You can see that there is a lot to understand here. And now I'm not going to talk through all of this, but if this is something that could be a fit for you, this would really be a valuable video to watch. It's only about 10 minutes long. And pay attention to things on the flowchart like this, because it's telling you right away, where the topics are coming from. And it's telling you about, their goals in terms of research discovery results, moving bidirectionally, through these two areas, and also identifying capability gaps and requirements. So this is something that would be worth spending some time on. Now, when you go to the website for this program, you can get some topics here. So these are pre-announcements of what they were expecting to support in 2024. Oh, and then we've got more social media. So this would be good to follow here as well. Now, when you look over at what's going on with Navy, here is something from their website for the Navy Medicine Research and Development Enterprise, as they call it. You can see they have stuff going on, all over the globe, not surprisingly, but you can also find here what they consider to be their core competencies, which is infectious disease, warfighter health, performance and operational support, combat casualty care, bioeffects, risk mitigation and countermeasures, physical, mental, and behavioral health. And then they've got support and programs that support the research itself and execution of the research. So clicking in a little bit further to one of their organizations, that's the Naval Health Research Center, You can see what they consider their core research areas to be. And I'm going to wrap up the discussion of the health programs here with this screenshot from the Army, the MRDC BAA that I had shown a few slides back, okay? Because this is in the appendix, and this is very, very helpful because they're actually listing for you here all the DoD and VA websites for organizations that are doing stuff like research related to health. Now, some of them you have absolutely heard of before, like ONR and DARPA, right? But some of them, like the Telemedicine and Advanced Technology Research Center, maybe you've never heard of that before. Now, I had not heard of it before, but this is likely not a funding organization, but there are likely people doing either research or implementing, new technologies at an organization like this. So as we go later through the course and I talk about getting in touch with people who are actually doing research at the DoD labs and DoD organizations, even some of these smaller organizations that you might think of as, oh, well, they probably don't have money or they don't have a funding program, it's still valuable to learn about them. And when you come across something like this document that lists all of them out for you, that's a really excellent resource. So, why do I have a picture of shoes here? Okay, because in order to find out what's going on with these research programs, you have to do something that's akin to something called shoe leather lobbying. Now, I learned this term from people who were involved in business in Washington, D.C., and the idea was that in order to make your case, for the policies and business that you wanted, in the old days, but before the internet, a person would have to lace up their shoes every morning and literally pound the pavement. They are walking down the street, they are knocking on doors, they're stopping people and asking them, will you listen to my idea? Can you introduce me to this person? Can I make the case for this program, right? And this was very much, a manual and a person by person type process. So that is very much what we're talking about here. Now, you don't really need to go anywhere, right? I was saying you don't need to travel all the way across the country just to go to a DARPA Connect event, but you can do all of this work through your computer, through, LinkedIn, email, etc. So it is a very manual process. So you really will have to lace up your shoes if you want to get the information that you need. Another image that I use here to convey this point is that of a detective. So we've all seen the TV shows where someone is doing some detective work and they're putting all this stuff up on the wall and they're drawing lines to connect this person to this place and to this timeline and to this place on the map and etc., like this person is doing here in the photo. So that's another approach that you do need to take to have success with getting the information you need. And that is to do the detective work. So you're going to have to talk to people, ask questions, and we'll talk more about that in a later part of this course. But I wanted to wrap up this section with these two images to make these 2 points that if you are feeling, well, this is kind of overwhelming, there's a lot of information here. There's a lot on the websites. I don't know if I'll remember, where to go or how to find this. Like, that's totally normal. That's completely to be expected. And that's why it's detective work. And you're going to have to, piece the pieces together to get your work supported, to get it to the right place so you can have the right conversation, which will lead to it being supported. So my final point that I want to make before I move on from this lesson is that this is like good news and bad news, right? It's kind of like the bad news, but it's not organized. I don't know where to find the information easily. Seems like a lot of time, right? So maybe that's disappointing. But the good news is that if you are willing to do the work, then that can lead to a good reward for you, right? Because for all the people that just say, I'm not willing to put all of these pieces together, then they're not going to be in the competition, right? If you are willing to do the hard work and find the right people and make those right connections, then that can put you in a very good situation for funding. So we're going to wrap up this lesson, and I will see you next time when we talk about the DoD funding programs.